There are two kinds of confidence in the world. The first is the one you were trained to chase. It needs likes, praise, support, and proof. It rises when people clap and collapses the moment someone frowns. It checks the room before speaking. It waits for permission to exist. That is the confidence most people live and die inside, and they never realize it was installed. Then there is the other kind, the kind that does not ask. The person who walks into a room as if their presence is already justified. They speak without scanning faces. They move without waiting for approval. From the outside, it can look dangerous, intimidating, even selfish. From the inside, it feels like a quiet permission that never runs out. Since childhood, your nervous system was wired to treat approval like oxygen. Grades, smiles, likes, performance reviews. Each one trained your brain to release confidence only after someone else said yes. What you were never taught is what happens when the brain stops waiting for that yes and starts rewarding itself for action. And it changes everything. This is where the process turns dark. In this video, you will see exactly how people rewire their reward system so the emotional payoff comes from starting, not from being praised. You will learn the 4 pillars behind this: acting before approval, programming your own authority through speech, cutting off the apology reflex, and training your brain to feel reward in private instead of in public. These pillars quietly reshape dopamine, testosterone, serotonin, and oxytocin, and with them, your relationship to risk, status, and control. There is a price. When this wiring takes hold, the social brakes that keep most people hesitant begin to weaken. The same system that frees you from fear of judgment can feed arrogance, coldness, and moral drift if you lose control of it. This is the same internal mechanism used by leaders, manipulators, and ruthlessly confident operators, whether they understand it or not. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you use it, your relationship with approval never returns to normal. Now subscribe before this channel disappears from your feed. Once it is gone, you go back to being the one shaped by these systems instead of the one who understands them. How your brain was quietly trained to obey approval. Your belief in yourself was not born in you as a finished thing. It was trained, step by step, mostly by other people. Psychologist Albert Bandura called it self-efficacy, your sense of what you can do. According to his work, this belief grows strongest from mastery experiences, actually doing hard things and succeeding. But look at how most childhoods are set up. You did not simply act and then decide for yourself if it was enough. You handed over your effort to adults and waited. Grades, gold stars, comments from teachers, moods of parents. All those signals taught your brain a simple rule: your capability is real only when someone else marks it as real. At first, this seems harmless. You do well, they praise you, you feel good. But under that cycle, your dopamine system was being trained. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz showed that dopamine is not just released when a reward comes, but when the brain predicts a reward and the outcome is uncertain. Over years of school and social media, your brain learned that the biggest rewards come from predicted approval, the moment before you see the grade, the seconds before you check the notification, the pause after you send a message and wait for a reply. Your dopamine spikes in that suspense, then adjusts based on the reaction. Now ask what happens when the risk is social disapproval. Your brain has rehearsed that pattern so many times that it quietly treats anticipated judgment as danger. Before you speak up in a meeting, your nervous system quickly runs a prediction. What if they think this is stupid, rude, or unnecessary? That calculation does not feel like math. It feels like hesitation, like a small tension in your chest, like a sudden need to think more. Your body is predicting a possible negative outcome and acts as if you are walking toward pain. So you delay, soften your statement, or stay silent. You do not call it fear. You call it being polite, reasonable, or careful. This conditioning started even earlier, in your attachment to caregivers. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth studied how children react to separation, attention, and approval. For a child, being rejected or ignored by a caregiver is not just sad, it is life-threatening. The brain links closeness with survival. If a child learns that acceptance is given when they please others and taken away when they disobey or stand out, The nervous system begins to treat disapproval as a kind of death signal. That fear is not logical, but it is deep. As an adult, when someone seems displeased, that old alarm can switch on as if your life is at stake, even though you are just in a conversation. Serotonin adds another layer. Research on serotonin and mood, including work by Philip Cowan, points to its role in stability and status. In social groups, your feeling of calm or depression often tracks your perceived rank. When you feel respected, your mood lifts. When you feel beneath others, your mood sinks. Over time, your emotional baseline becomes tied to where you think you stand in the human pecking order. That means your day-to-day peace is not coming from your internal standard, but from an invisible scoreboard in your head. Every frown, every ignored message, every public mistake feels like a drop in rank, and therefore a threat to your emotional stability. Put these layers together and you get the approval loop you live in. An opportunity appears to speak, to start something, to ask, to stand out. Instantly, a fear calculation starts based on old attachment patterns and dopamine predictions. Your body signals danger. You feel a small rush of anxiety, maybe a tight jaw, maybe a rush of thoughts telling you to wait. You then search for safety. Is someone else going to move first? Can you get a second opinion? Can you ask if it is okay? You look around for micro signals of acceptance. Only when you sense that the risk is low enough, you act. If things go well, you feel relief, not power. If things go badly, the shame hits harder than the actual consequence. This loop leads to a lifetime of moving second. You watch others take roles, start trends, crack jokes, pitch ideas, claim space. You tell yourself they are louder, more extroverted, or naturally confident. In reality, many of them simply broke the approval loop earlier than you did. Their nervous system stopped treating anticipated judgment as a stop sign. They built their sense of capability less from being graded and more from acting in uncertainty repeatedly. Their chemistry is different. Risk gives them dopamine. Status comes from self-assertion, not just from being liked. The dark truth is that you and they are not playing the same inner game, even when you sit in the same room. You are hearing the potential judgment in every move. They are hearing their own decision as the main signal. Your brain has been trained to check for permission before feeling safe. Theirs has been trained to feel safe for moving without it. That difference runs your whole life from the background, and until you see it clearly, you will keep trying to fix a confidence problem with more approval, instead of changing the reward system that keeps you obedient. Pillar 1. Rewiring risk and dopamine. Most people wait for confidence and then act. Bandura's research on self-efficacy shows that this logic is backwards. Confidence grows from actions taken in doubt, not from waiting until doubt disappears. The brain decides what you are capable of by watching what you actually do, especially under uncertain conditions. When you move before you feel ready, and the world does not collapse, your nervous system records a quiet note. This is survivable. Repeat that pattern enough times, and the story in your head starts to flip from, I cannot handle this, to, I tend to handle this. This is where Schultz's dopamine work becomes useful. Dopamine is strongest not when life is safe, but when there is a meaningful chance of gain or loss. When you take a social or personal risk, such as speaking first in a group, making a suggestion that could be rejected, or acting on an idea without asking for permission, you put yourself into uncertainty. At first, your brain hates it. The old approval wiring screams at you to wait. But if you choose small, controlled risks and some of them go well, your dopamine system begins to associate that jump into the unknown with possible reward. The prediction error, that surprise of things going better than expected, is what changes the circuit. Over time, your brain learns that risk itself is not poison. It might even be a shortcut to feeling alive. To use this, you do not need dramatic moves. You start with micro risks. Send the message without rereading it 10 times. Give an opinion in a meeting without first checking what everyone else thinks. Make a decision in your team or friend group without asking for endless consensus. Walk into a room and choose a seat without scanning for approval. In each case, your body will push fear at you. The point is not to feel fearless, but to move while that fear is still talking. Afterward, you do not search for praise. You simply notice that you acted. The world is still standing, and maybe the outcome was not as bad as predicted. This is how exposure works in anxiety research. Joseph Wolpe and others showed that when people repeatedly face what scares them without escaping, the fear response gradually weakens. The nervous system learns that the threat is not actually life-ending. By taking social risks again and again without letting yourself retreat into approval-seeking, you expose your nervous system to judgment and non-judgment until the two lose their grip. You become bored with the feeling that once ran your life. There is a darker side to this pillar. High dominance individuals and manipulators often run on constant action before approval. They do not wait for group agreement. They set the direction and force others to adjust. In a meeting, they speak first and longest, so the conversation bends around their points. In relationships, they make decisions before asking what others want, which trains everyone else to adapt to them. By always moving first, they gain agenda-setting power. Others become reactors instead of actors. Being one step ahead in action usually means being one step ahead in mental control. The important line here is simple. Every time you wait for reassurance, you strengthen your obedience to external permission. You tell your nervous system that safety lives in other people's reactions. Every time you move first without that reassurance, you strengthen internal power. You train your body to feel that your own decision is enough to justify action. If you do this recklessly, you can become insensitive and careless. If you do it strategically and ethically, you break the invisible leash that makes you take your turn last in your own life. Pillar 2. Programming your own authority. Your brain does not just watch what you do. It also listens to what you say, especially your own voice. Research on auditory self-monitoring shows that when you speak, the brain sends a copy of that signal to itself. This helps you recognize your own voice and judge what you are saying. Over time, those spoken phrases become part of the data your brain uses to decide who you are. If your speech is full of doubt, apology, and self-attack, your nervous system starts to treat that as a description of reality. When you start giving it firm, clear statements about your own authority, it adapts to that as well, slowly and quietly. One tool is what you can call mirror statements. These are short, dominant, present tense lines you say out loud in private. Things like, I decide my pace. I do not explain my presence. I move without asking. I correct. I do not beg. The content matters less than the tone. Short, steady, and claimed as already true, not as a wish. When you speak these sentences out loud and hear them with your own ears, you are feeding your auditory system a new pattern. Your voice becomes an authority signal instead of just a background noise waiting for others to approve. Biologically, this practice hits several systems. When your words match the actions you start taking, dopamine fires because your internal story and external behavior are aligned. That feeling of alignment is rewarding. Testosterone is linked to assertive posture, tone, and behavior. Speaking from your chest with clear statements, while you hold your ground physically, can cause small rises in dominance-related hormones, which then feed back into how calm and solid you feel. Neural plasticity means the circuits you repeat become easier to fire. The more often you speak as if you trust yourself, the more natural self-trust feels. This stands in sharp contrast to the usual dependence on external validation. Normally, you wait to hear praise, comfort, or permission from someone else before you relax. Your nervous system is tuned to their voice as the final truth. With self-validation through speech, you reverse that order. You hear your own approval first. You get used to the sound of your own certainty. Then, when other people agree, it is a bonus, not a requirement. When they disagree, it may still sting, but it does not erase your inner signal as easily. There is a dark pattern here too. Narcissists and ruthless leaders often do this naturally. They repeat their own narratives out loud so often that any opposing view feels not just wrong, but almost unreal to them. Their brains have been trained to treat their own voice as the top authority in the room, even when facts say otherwise. That is the risk you carry if you build self-validation without keeping ties to reality. But if you combine this pillar with honest results and real feedback, you gain something extremely rare: the ability to feel solid inside without needing constant emotional oxygen from others. Your own words become the ground you stand on. Pillar 3. Apology suppression. Apology suppression starts from a simple observation. Many people apologize for existing. Submissive behavior research shows that constant self-deprecation is a way of signaling low status. The person who says sorry for taking up space, for asking questions, for minor delays, for normal needs, is teaching their own nervous system that they are a burden. Over time, they begin to feel guilty just for being present. Every apology is not just words. It is a small act of self-erasure. In dominance and status studies, including work by Mehta and Josephs on testosterone, high-status individuals show less submissive signaling. They do not shrink from eye contact as much. They do not over-explain. They do not rush to apologize to smooth every tiny bump. In any interaction, constant apologies become micro-signs that you see yourself as lower rank. More importantly, your own body picks it up. You start to expect that you must soften, justify, or shrink before others can accept you. The practice here is not to become rude and never say sorry again. It is to eliminate unnecessary apologies and replace them with neutral ownership. Instead of saying sorry for being 2 minutes late, you say thank you for waiting. Instead of sorry, I am so annoying, you say here is what I need. When you actually make a mistake, you do not grovel. You say I missed that. Here is what I will do next time. This trains your system to see your presence as normal, not as an error. You still take responsibility, but you stop treating your existence as something that needs constant softening. Pillar 4. Private reward conditioning. Private reward conditioning targets your dopamine source. Modern life has taught you that reward lives outside. Likes, comments, applause, performance reviews, public praise. Every time you post an achievement waiting for a reaction, you wire your brain to believe that nothing is real until others see it. Self-determination theory, by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, shows that autonomy and self-generated satisfaction are more stable motivators than external rewards. When your main reward comes from the inside, you are harder to push around. To shift this, you start celebrating wins in isolation. You complete a hard task, and you do not announce it. You make progress in the gym, on a project, in a habit, and you keep it to yourself. Maybe you mark it in a private log. Maybe you take a moment alone to feel the satisfaction. The important part is that no one else sees it, and you do not go looking for applause. At first it may feel empty, like eating without taste. That emptiness shows how dependent you have become on broadcast. If you keep going, something changes. Your brain starts to release dopamine for the act itself, for meeting your own standard, not for the reaction it gets. Serotonin and oxytocin also begin to shift their anchors. Instead of tying your mood and sense of connection to how much others approve of you today, you start tying them to questions like, am I aligned with what I said I would do? Am I living by my own rules? You still care about relationships, but they stop being your only source of emotional security. Your inner stability comes more from self-respect than from popularity. This makes you calmer in conflict, less desperate in romance, and less frantic at work. The final outcome of these two pillars can be frightening to people around you. When you stop apologizing for existing, you stop being easy to guilt. When you stop needing applause to feel good, you stop being easy to control with praise or silence. If you keep your ethics intact, this makes you strong, steady, and fair. If you do not, it can make you cold, self-serving, and very hard to reach. That is why this information is usually wrapped in soft messages or hidden behind paywalls in private groups. A person who no longer bends for shame or dances for approval becomes unpredictable in a world built to manage obedient nervous systems. The risk: detaching your confidence from external feedback is powerful, but it is not automatically wise. If you disconnect too far, without any anchor in reality, you begin to drift into narcissism and grandiosity. Research on narcissistic traits and the dark triad shows a pattern: inflated self-view, low empathy, and a strong need for dominance. High self-efficacy without humility can become overconfidence bias, where you consistently overestimate your abilities and underestimate risks. In that state, you can damage careers, relationships, and even your own life while still feeling certain you are right. Once your dopamine and testosterone are linked tightly to self-authorization, a new addiction risk appears. Every time you act boldly without asking, and it works, you get a strong internal reward. If you start chasing that feeling just to feel powerful, you may begin to ignore quiet signals telling you to slow down, listen, or reconsider. Moral discomfort, other people's pain, small hints that your plan is failing, all of that can get drowned out by the rush of taking charge again. You start to move, not because it is the right move, but because you crave the feeling of being the one who moved. This is where a dark guardrail system becomes necessary. You do not hand your confidence back to public opinion, but you do install a few hard checks. First, you use objective feedback channels, not what people feel about you, but what the numbers, results, and concrete outcomes say. Are your projects actually working? Are your relationships healthy over time, not just intense in the moment? Second, you keep one or two trusted truth-tellers in your life. People who have proven they are not impressed by you, who are allowed to challenge you directly. You do not have to obey them, but you listen carefully when their message hurts your pride. Third, you run periodic reality audits. You sit down and compare your self-image with the last 6 months of outcomes. You think you are a great leader. Are people growing under you, or just afraid of you? You think you are honest. How often do you hide facts that feel inconvenient? You think you are strong. How often do you avoid things that might make you feel weak? This is not about shame. It is about making sure your self-authorization matches the world you are actually creating. The real method here is not to stop caring what anyone thinks. That is a childish fantasy. If you do not care at all, you lose information. You stop noticing how your behavior lands. You become dangerous, not powerful. The real shift is to stop needing permission to move, while staying sensitive to reality and consequences. You act without waiting, but you watch what happens after you act. You do not surrender your core confidence when people criticize you, but you still examine the criticism for valuable data. You remain the main author of your life, but you keep reading the reviews with a clear head. Some of the most effective leaders and performers live in this balance. They do not beg for approval, yet they study outcomes. They are not ruled by fear of being disliked, yet they are keenly aware of how people respond. They decide their own direction, yet they are willing to correct course when reality contradicts their beliefs. This is calibrated detachment. It feels different from fake bravado because it does not need to shout. It sits quietly in the center of your nervous system and says, I move myself, and I will adjust based on what is true, not based on who claps. Once you train your nervous system to treat self-authorization as the main reward instead of social approval, you cross an invisible line. You will no longer fit cleanly into environments that expect you to wait, ask, and obey. You will feel their pressure, but you will also feel a new resistance inside, a refusal to hand over control. Some people will call it confidence, some will call it arrogance, some will find it attractive, others threatening. What matters is that, for the first time, your sense of worth and direction will not be rented from other people. It will be owned, and once you have felt that, going back to an approval-dependent life will feel like trying to breathe under someone else's hand. So reward and risk is your choice. I'll see you in the next one.